Hello everyone, welcome back to the OneTalk Podcast. You're here with your host Ryan McCarthy, and today we are joined with Henry Miller. Henry is the founder of Latitude Coffee Roasters and also Base Chem Cafe. Latitude Coffee is a highly awarded coffee roaster, winning multiple awards over the years. And within today's episode, we touch on Henry's story in founding these companies, as well as the mission and purpose behind it as well. Henry's an absolute wealth of knowledge in the coffee industry. He's been a judge on award panels. He's also been in the industry for quite a fair few years, as well as his father. And just to get a really good insight into this world, which is really cool, and to get a lot of business lessons and tips and things that he's learned along the way. So today's episode is a really cool one to dive into, a lot of interesting takeaways and also some really cool stories. So I can't wait for you all to dive in and check it out. In other news, every single month on the OneTalk Podcast, we feature a new GoFundMe to be featured for the whole month on the podcast. And for December, it's for a young fella named Aaron. And Aaron is battling mouth cancer and he's needing support with his wellness journey and recovery journey. And anything that you can do to help would mean so much. So the link will be in the bio to help Aaron with his fight of cancer. One more thing, if you could please leave this podcast a rating, it means so much in terms of helping this podcast grow, but also reaching a larger audience. So if you're on Spotify or Apple, if you could leave a rating, if you're on YouTube, if you could subscribe and leave a like, it would mean the world to me. Well, without further ado, let's welcome Henry.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all. The marathon continue. Victory lap tonight, though. Victory lap tonight.
Welcome to the OneTalk Podcast with Ryan McCarthy.
The marathon continues. That's what you would say.
Welcome to the OneTalk Podcast, Henry Miller. How you doing, man?
Yeah, good. Alive, kicking. How are you?
Yeah, doing well, man. It's good to have you here. We've been knowing each other for a little over a year now, I'd say.
Yeah, pretty much. I think the first chat was at a Bucks party in a pool.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
What better way to connect?
No, exactly.
Like actually even just thinking about that quickly, it's crazy how quick time's flown until now. Like when you reflect, that was like February this year. Now we're nearly in December.
So much has happened in that period of time, man.
Yeah.
So much from, business, weather, economy, everything, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's incredible how time has just passed since that. Feels like it's at least 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Also consider our mate that we were there for to be fully married like 5 years in my head, but it's not even been a year yet.
Yeah, it hasn't even been a year yet. Like it's just been one of those years. But it can be the same with business as well, like when you are in business or you're on the hustle of creating something and pushing something, like time can go so quick as well. Like me with podcasting, but for you with Latitude Coffee, like I can imagine from the start point to now, it's probably gone so quick too. Yeah,
because I still believe in my head when I'm talking to people, I still feel as though Latitude's sort of young, and it's like we're 18 months, 2 years in, but here we are, and it's 7 years since we sort of registered the business and 6 years since the first roast, and that's just I consider it to be last year.
Yeah.
And I don't like to bring it up so much, but like with COVID and everything, how people always talk about it, but it's true how time just flew in that period. It felt like it was like this dead space, and you just sort of did what you needed to survive, certainly in business. And there's not necessarily the most amount of memories because you couldn't do much, right? So that's just sort of passed by, and that was 2 years. So,
well, even during COVID, what do you think were some of the biggest lessons you learned in business for yourself?
Diversity in where you're selling your product to. We were very lucky, I think, early on with the way that we set up. In my mind, the vision was to have sort of commercial customers, larger scale, sort of white bag contract roasting, as well as supplying the specialty cafes with our brand and building a brand. But yeah, I think by having that, a lot of cafes struggled. We lost a fair few sort of specialty cafes just because they couldn't survive. Our volumes dropped drastically as well. But because, say, for example, we're in a lot of petrol and convenience sites, that volume, they were obviously essential. They were operating at the same capacity that they were prior. So for us, we didn't drop any volume. It was sort of where some specialty cafes dropped down, then it was brought up because everyone's still drinking the same amount of coffee.
Yeah, the demand picked up elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So I think just having diversity in where your product's going, certainly, that was our lifeline for sure. That paid to have the lights on and held us.
Yeah, because how long into business did that hit, like COVID?
Well, we did the first roast in 2018. So obviously I'd say really it impacted here like March 2020, I'd say. It really hit us here maybe February 2020. So we had we started snowballing like just as COVID was hitting the end of 2019. There was a lot of hype around the business, as there would be. Obviously we're a new business, we're a new player in town. So there was a lot of sort of community events going on and we were hosting a fair few of them. So it was a real big snowball happening, and then that died off, and now I'm trying to get that hype to come back again, but it's a lot more difficult when everyone already knows you. It's trying to find something new to sort of shout about, and just be consistent and just showing you there, and we'll try and get some more community things happening probably as we go into the new year, but let's see.
But I think this is good for business owners to know, like for yourself, especially early doors, having such a challenge come up like that. Like, how did you have a perspective or build a perspective to continue on and diversify and continue building the brand, even though you had something that was out of your control happening that was devastating a lot of people, especially in your industry? But how did you, I guess, kick in the gear and use your mind to diversify and try and make Latitude continue on?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, it was obviously survival. I think a lot of people, whether you've been in business for 1 year or you've been in business for 30 years, no one had experienced something that impacted the price of your goods going up and having to make price changes, logistically trying to get things to your end consumer and everything. It was sort of like shooting in the dark for a lot of it, and sort of acting on instinct. Which maybe where I'm lucky that I didn't necessarily have a massive background in business, not a crazy amount of experience. So it was just sort of acting on instinct, and luckily the instinct was right, but it could have gone the other way, right? I think it was just instinct, acting as things came, and definitely prioritizing where you saw that volume was able to be there, prioritizing that, and just doing what you can to make sure you support that customer that's providing the end consumer.
That's a great life lesson and business lesson when you are able to back yourself and you build that self-trust, because especially now making big decisions in the future, you know you're capable of it. Yeah,
100%. And I think it's difficult. I have said to a fair few people that in the last sort of year, regardless of COVID, forget that happened and that there was that difficulty. The naivety possibly that I set up Latitude when I was 21. So I don't know right now if I'd been working for, say, another 6-7 years, if I would do it again now. And that's not like it's gone really well, but I just don't know. I feel like maybe with a bit more maturity comes a lot more, I guess you're more scared, right, about failing. So that naivety allowed me to sort of set the business up. It'd be difficult now. I don't know. Like I just jumped in. I was obviously, maybe like I said, a bit of naivety, but jumped in, went for it, let's go. And I just don't know if it'd be the same now, but I'm glad I did it when I did.
Yeah. So. It's like that when you're young, though, where you can feel like you're invincible.
Yeah,
like 100%. Even with sports and stuff like that. Even now, thinking about football next year, I'm like, all right, I've got to make sure I'm in good health to make sure, I don't pop this thing or...
Yeah, exactly. When you're 18, you're like, right, okay, perfect. I'll play a bit of FIFA and I'll just get up and that's it. I'll be good to go. I'll play 90 minutes. And now it's, already preparing, like we've got the season starting in 4 months. All right, okay, I need to start stretching. It's like, Do
you have, with the community events, do you have any in the works that you can talk about at the moment? Or is it all still planning? And
it's still definitely planning. I think prior to COVID, there was a lot of happening with coffee roasters hosting events, say latte art smackdowns. I think that where basically baristas from different cafes all over Brisbane, Gold Coast, Sunny Coast would all compete basically, and it turns into an event where you'd get head roasters, business owners, everyone's there supporting either their staff or just seeing what's happening, talking to people, and it's like a good networking, obviously. I think something along those lines, maybe not latte art smackdown. I feel like that's come and gone. So maybe like brewers competitions or tasting competitions. Even just getting people in to taste your coffee, or I know that there's a couple of our green bean suppliers that are wanting to sort of host tasting sessions for their coffee. And obviously we've got quite a pretty facility at Latitude, so we can host a lot of people.
Yeah.
So even just sort of leveraging off of relationships that we've got there, to be able to host events and help them as well, as it helps our image at the end of the day as well. So it works for everyone.
Yeah, I think that'll be good too, because I think like community events is one of the most important ways to like branch out and make it bigger. Because one thing I've found over the years, especially running events, people don't really remember your interactions with them. They remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And through doing events, they remember those moments, and it creates that core memory, which then brings back returning customers, but then also extends like word of mouth into the community to more people.
Exactly. I think it was also, baristas that go and compete, they're talking in their cafe in Toowong or Ipswich or whatever, or up in Noosa. They're like, oh yeah, I did a latte at Smackdown last night. I came third, pretty chuffed with myself. It was down at North Lakes, at Latitude Coffee, and that's just, there's a customer up in Noosa or in Ipswich that's never heard of us, and just by dropping a name, they might just jump on and be like, oh, where is this place? And order a bag of coffee, sort of thing. So, because it's their favourite barista talking about it. So,
because even when I was doing my research for this podcast, like I went on Google just to try and get as much in-depth research I could on Latitude, and I found like a Reddit post, and there was someone put up a post saying, what's the best coffee beans within Brisbane region, willing to travel. And he like put up like a list of like stuff that he's looking for and what he's against and things like that. And I had a couple of people like, you need to go to Latitude. Latitude is good beans, and like just the word of mouth for like a Reddit post like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's unreal. I haven't actually seen that post, so
I'll send it through to you.
Maybe when I need a little bit of a pep up of motivation, I can read that. But it's good to know that we're obviously doing something right. That people are willing to rave about it. I think it's so easy to get negative feedback or bad reviews by comparison to getting really good feedback. I think it's one of the hardest things in business, that you have to perform at this level constantly, so on the money, to be able to get good reviews. Because the second, it's so easy for someone, they're a lot more inclined when they get a bad experience to go online and make sure people know about it. But that when you get a good one, that you've done a sublime job. So that's mega when you can hear good feedback. It means that much more.
Yeah, right? But it's also like focusing on the good feedback as well, because one thing I've found is like where focus goes, energy flows. But I find especially us as humans, we always focus on the negative because we're always looking for improvements.
Yeah.
And we can get lost in that, and it can like demotivate us and pursue our mission and continue and on. But it's making sure that if we see the negative, we also see the positive as well.
100%. And like you said, focusing on that and trying to build on that. I think I had even just an email yesterday from someone saying, when I sent out some Black Friday marketing saying, wind it up, you didn't send the coffee to me within 4 days or something. And I was like, okay, well, and that got me down for about 10 minutes. I was sitting in the car, and just after I read it, and I kept repeating in my head, what are you doing? There's so many other emails coming back and people ordering because they've been satisfied in the past. Just focus on that. That's good. We're doing a good job. We slipped up once maybe there, which is a shame. And that sort of thing, one compared to, 30 orders of people coming back, that was the part that stuck in my head. It's like, come on.
Yeah, it's like being proactive instead of reactive.
Yeah, 100%, definitely.
It's like I'm really keen to like go back a couple of years now.
Yeah.
So I want to learn more about you, the journey of Latitude, before we go into a bit more of the established company is now. So for yourself, man, like where are you from?
Yeah.
We'll start with there.
So born in England, born in Welwyn Garden City. Family's all like northern, so Wigan and Liverpool and everything. So immediately I grew up down south in Hertfordshire, in the countryside. And then I think when I was about 8, moved up to Liverpool. So spent about 3 years there, and then ended up moving to Spain.
Nice.
When I was 12.
Whereabouts?
So down in the south in Andalusia, or should I say Andalucia, if you're from there. But that was quite an experience. Sort of went there on holiday, pulled into this town to get fuel, said this looks pretty. Let's have lunch here. And then we had lunch, and my mum said, look, I'll be back in half an hour. So she went away, and she came back and she said to me and my stepdad, I've just rented an apartment, signed a lease for a year. One of the best international baccalaureate schools is actually 15 minutes up the road. Henry's got an interview with the headmaster tomorrow. So that's it. We're moving here. Mike, get on a plane, Ryanair, back to England, pack up a container and send it out here. That was sort of, I guess that's child life, right? And then went back to, I think because of that time I spent over in Spain, I then went back to university in England, studying civil engineering or civil and infrastructure engineering. Hated it.
Yeah.
Just couldn't get over, and it was nothing to do with the course, nothing to do with the studying. I enjoyed all of that. It was just purely down to the environment. And it's always something to remember if you're not enjoying something, is just have a little step back and think, is it actually, try and like split it up and be objective as you can.
Yeah.
Is to sort of go, what is it that's causing this? Is it actually what I'm doing, or is it just where I am?
Yeah.
Or who I'm working with? Are they valuing me? Are they listening to me? Or, but yeah, for me, it was the environment. I needed to get out of there. And my mum said to me, sort of, you're not coming back to Spain because it's one of the most highly unemployed countries in Europe. So there's no work here. So you're not coming back here.
Yeah.
I didn't want to stay in England, obviously, and luckily my dad had set up a coffee business here in Australia. So she said, look, as punishment for leaving university, almost, you can go and live in Australia.
Well, the punishment.
Go and work for your dad.
What year was that?
So that was in end of 2015.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, I came out and started fixing coffee machines for him. I mean, obviously, I think I was always destined to come into the coffee industry, whether I liked it or not. With sort of the business that my parents had built back in the UK, at the end of, when would that be? Early 90s, or 1987, I think it actually started. So yeah, I think that was always destined to come there. But yeah, I think I absolutely loved Australia from the second I got here. I think at the time, my dad had just won the contract for Coles Express nationwide, every coffee machine in every single store. So I think 3 months after I landed here, I'd already been to every state, every territory, seen it all except from Tassie, which I'm itching to get to. But yes, I absolutely love that. And as you're traveling around, you're experiencing things. You're obviously working on coffee all the time, so it was in my face. And then you sort of have a look at cafes and what they're doing. And there was a couple that stood out and ignited in me, like, how's someone getting this sort of flavour out of a coffee?
Yeah.
And why is it so different? I couldn't actually tell you why it was different at the time. I just knew that it was incredible. I couldn't break it down. And then, yeah, I guess I just jumped into it and said, I want to go and do my own thing. And my dad sort of had a bit of a giggle at me, like, have you ever roasted coffee before in your life? Have you ever even seen a roaster? I was like, no. But I want to be able to do that. So, yeah, then we just went for it, I guess.
One of the questions I've got, especially when you left Spain, went to university, and you're talking about your environment there, do you think learning about how an environment can impact you made you realise now running a business how important the environment is? Or did you know that before you went to university?
No, I definitely didn't know it before I went to uni. That was like one of those life lessons. That was the moment, right? And I think it happens to a fair few people in terms of university, and maybe they really enjoyed something, but they dropped out from doing it because of an environment. But they didn't recognise that they really did love what they were doing at uni. And they just go, oh, that wasn't for me, which is a shame. But I think that was one of those life lessons, and I was able to sort of notice that the second I got here. So, yeah, that's one of those, just a life lesson. And yeah, and then when you move from somewhere like Derby in the Midlands to all of a sudden you're living in Curl on the northern beaches of Sydney. When I was living with my dad when I first moved out, it's like,
yeah,
come on.
That, and also like traveling so much of Australia so quickly as well.
Yeah, 100%. It's an eye opener. You know, you do, 16 hours driving to go and do an install, 16 hours west of Sydney. And then you just sort of, you're on Google Maps and you just sort of put the route in, and then you're like, wow, that's long, that's a big drive. Zoom out on the maps, and all of a sudden you've put this tiny little dent in the corner of Australia, and it's astonishing, really. People don't understand logistically getting things done in Australia, how hard it is when you talk to people back in the UK who are in similar businesses. They're just sort of like, we got 20 technicians, we can cover the whole country with servicing, 3,000 coffee machines. And it's like, yeah, okay, fine. But if you get a service call on the opposite side of the country, you can be there overnight if it's urgent for a new customer, for example. Whereas here, there's no chance. So, you do have to have that coverage. Everyone needs to be spread out, and you do need more people to make the same thing happen.
Yeah, that's where the networking comes into play, like getting to know people. And like, when did the networking begin with you? Was it when you first started traveling around Australia, when you started to meet people, or did that become later on in your story? To
be honest, I think the one skill before starting Latitude up that I feel I could easily say that I was like accomplished or advanced in is communication and relationships, which is networking, right? So yeah, it definitely came into its own once we started the business. But it's definitely something that I knew. It was all I had really in terms of a skill. Like I was new to coffee roasting. Okay, I did like a 2-day course before jumping into the business, but the skill, what I had to lean on was communication. Yeah. And networking. So that's, and only through that is, how you grow and how you build relationships, which for me, which I'm sure you were going to come to, what's the foundations of Latitude and what we sort of lean on the most, what's the pillars? It's definitely relationships is the number one. Yeah. But yeah, networking, I've always been a talker. Yeah. I've always been a bit of a yapper, but
it's part of us Northerners.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I even with my new partner, I'll go out and we'd sit at a table. We were over in Spain 3 months ago, and I ended up talking. I got to talk to the person on the table behind me, having a conversation that I felt like I could give something to, and then just sort of engaging with them always. And it's the same when you know what it's like in the north of England. You always end up talking to the people next to you. Yeah. It's just sort of instilled in you.
Yeah, it is, because I remember like being young, just even going to dinner with like the family, mum, dad, nan and granddad. Like you're just talking to everyone as you're going out and about. Like even when we go to Spain, to Lanzarote or Ventura, like you just mix with everyone that's there. Like now I feel like we're at a time where people are a bit more isolated. Maybe it's on the back end of what we mentioned before, but especially back then, like it was just normal to communicate with people you don't know.
Yeah, it was the only form of communication you had. Yeah. Like not too long ago, really. It's happened so quick. Sure. But yeah, now obviously not get into technology, but obviously that's huge in terms of people maybe not interacting in the same way or not as confident. Yeah. Not backing yourself as much, or it's just not. It feels like it could almost be a habitual thing. Yeah. Like when you're growing up and you see your parents doing the same thing. Just talking to everyone around you, just sort of do it. Yeah. And you don't second guess it. It'd be interesting to see how the next generation is, to see if they're in any way, shape or form like that.
Yeah. So yeah, especially with social media and stuff, to see, I guess, how people start to interact, because I guess it changes for each generation, doesn't it?
Of course it does. Yeah. Of course.
But even like, I want to touch on the context, what you're saying before we get to the next part of your story, is 11 United Kingdoms fit just in Queensland? 11 just in Queensland, and there's 56 million people in the UK, 26 million people in Australia. So Australia is so massive, so spread out. But then, like you said, to be able to get a worker over on the other side of the country in Perth is so much more difficult to maybe get from Liverpool to, I don't know, Watford, you know what I mean? So like, how did you, I guess, overcome that challenge, or what did you do to put things in place to simplify that process even more for yourself?
Yeah, I think I wish we had more business on the other side of the country, but certainly talking from my dad's business, it was having the technicians over there, but having someone you can rely on. It's so far away over in Perth, and luckily now I've got that person over there. But having someone you can rely on, you almost need to run it like your own business. You know, you're 3 hours for most part of the year. You're 3 hours in terms of a time difference as well. So yeah, having a person that you can rely on, having a good relationship with that person is definitely key. But yeah, I think it comes down to that.
Yeah, is there certain like characteristics or values you're looking people to like operate things or to work, or is it more so just how you feel with, I guess, the first time meeting someone and how you click?
Yeah, I think communication is the number one thing. I feel as though in business, even if you can't do something for a customer immediately, if you don't communicate that, it becomes a big problem. Yeah, definitely. But if they're open to communication, they're willing to sort of face it immediately and be like, I'm only going to be able to get there in a week. Yeah. Then all of a sudden, it really calms down that interaction and takes it from being like a 1 out of 10 to like a 5 out of 10 performance, right? Which is tolerable. You can put up with a couple of those here and there. But yeah, I think it's communication, number one. I feel as though when we've always come into hiring coffee machine technicians, or when I've come into hiring guys to roast coffee when it comes to Latitude, I can teach someone to become a coffee roaster. That's not a problem. I can't teach someone to take on knowledge or to listen or to just just be a good person and be interactive with customers as well. That's just a natural ability from your upbringing or whatever. So certainly when it comes to like the actual skill side, that can be taught.
Yeah.
But just being someone who's good in communication is the first thing that jumps to mind when you're thinking of hiring someone.
Yeah, I agree as well, especially communication, because there's two parts of it which are super important. There's one is listening, actually listening with the intent to understand.
And active listening.
Yeah,
exactly,
active listening. And then also don't make promises you can't keep.
Yeah.
So I find too many people when they want to communicate, especially in business, they'll say instead of 10 days, they'll say 5, but they know deep down it's 10, and then they try and get it done in 5.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen, then and the person who is wanting the support is sitting there like, right, well, my expectations haven't been met or my needs haven't been met. But if you just open and honest from the beginning, like it solves so many problems.
It does, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. But the next part we want to get into is you started to roast coffee yourself, or you wanted to begin that journey. Can you start from there and talk to us about how that all began?
Well, first things first, one of the next life lessons that I learned, I will say, has been crucial now to me as a human and someone in business as well now, is that I had a business partner at the beginning of Latitude, and we bounced off each other really well. I only actually knew him for a year. He was working for my dad here in Queensland.
Yeah.
So we basically said, let's go and do a roasting course. So we did a roasting course at one of the most highly regarded roasters here in Queensland. Been in the industry for 30 odd years down in Melbourne, as well as Sydney and Queensland, and then he set up his own thing. So we went there, did a roasting course. We then went, and one thing we both believed in truly was having the best equipment. You get what you pay for. So we went out, German cast iron roasters, bought the Probats. So roasting course, 2 days, then waited for our roasters to jump in. Meanwhile, we're doing our normal job, fixing coffee machines. Yeah. We originally started looking on the Gold Coast. That was where we wanted to open up. But the majority of the Gold Coast didn't have natural gas plumbed into a lot of the warehouses. So then it sort of drove us further north, and we ended up in North Lakes, looked at this warehouse, went, that's way too big. We were thinking a lot smaller scale at this point. We were hoping to supply specialty cafes, because that's where both of our passion was. So then looked at a few others, and then we ended up looping back to that very first one, and that's the one we're in today. Which luckily we did that because we didn't know what was around the corner and about to happen. And then with the first little roaster arrived, 1 kilo at a time, we ordered in, I think, 8 different coffees.
So when you talk about 8 different coffees, you sourced 8 different beans from all around the world, or?
Yeah, so basically we went to, at this point, you're obviously small, you're getting into it, you're not speaking directly to farmers. Farmers are probably not even going to talk to you for the most part at this point. So there's basically a lot of green bean suppliers here in Australia. There's sort of, I'd say nowadays there's probably 4 key ones. At that point there was 3. Went and did cupping sessions with them. Very quickly worked out there was one that we were never ever going to work with, no matter how long we're in business. And I'm still holding that true to today. Yeah. And then we made a good relationship with one at the time. Bought a very diverse sort of different coffees. So we went to Brazil, the largest coffee producing country in the world. So it's a staple. Because it's the largest producer and the highest volume, it also means price, because we're also starting a business. So you've got to think of that. And then Colombia, went into Central America. I believe Nicaragua was one of the first ones. Then a couple of coffees from Africa. So Kenya and Ethiopia, again, the 2 biggest producers over there, and for a reason, the best and price-wise. And then came across, I think Indonesia was one of the last ones that we picked up.
So did you actually travel over the sources? Not at this time?
So this went down to a cupping session in Sydney.
Yeah, okay.
And just cupped coffees there with them and tasted them. And again, at this point in the journey, I don't think, like, a lot of coffee tasting and your sourcing, nowadays, the muscle, like when you're tasting coffees and you're able to break it down, it's a muscle memory thing more than anything. So now I can taste a coffee, I can break it down into categories and go, okay, that's not just fruity, that's, poached raspberry or, overcooked blueberry, and like start tasting these things.
Really develop a palate.
Yeah, exactly. And which is really hard to do in coffee. I think there's 800 different flavor compounds that you can pick out of coffee, which is like 4 times what you can get out of a glass of wine. So when people think about sommeliers being the greatest palate talents in the world, coffee, the guys who do Q grading, which is the equivalent, what would you call it, equivalent qualification in coffee, those boys, their palates are sublime, like
next level,
out of this world, and a lot of them find it with ease to cross over to being a sommelier. But yeah, I'm certainly nowhere near that still to this day. But at this point, we're tasting coffee and going, that's really good. And that was our decision-making process at that point, which was fine for where we were, because we were still, obviously, we weren't roasting yet. We just got the 1 kilo, and it was basically trial and error. And we would taste something and go, oh, God, what have we done there? Yeah. So you got a very basic foundation, and then we sort of built a way of roasting from there. We actually ended up roasting very different in different styles. So he liked to hit beans harder earlier, put more heat and more energy in the roast earlier, whereas I was a bit softer with them. So, for example, for Brazils or coffees that were grown at lower altitudes, normally, not always, but normally give a lower density, it would work a lot better. So I would bring the best out of Brazils, for example.
So it's a lower density quickly. Is that just when you see on like a coffee bag 1 to 10, or is that different?
No, when you see 1 to 10 is, for example, you'd see that so you'd see that a lot with like Nespresso capsules. Yeah. So that's sort of strength. And I think it's quite often misconceived or mispercepted, if that's a word, with the end consumer. So like the strength could be just that the roast has been taken further, so it tastes stronger, it cuts through the milk more. Doesn't mean it's going to get you up and going quicker, always. Okay. Not that it's got a higher caffeine content necessarily. So yeah, when I'm talking of density, it's literally how tightly packed the cells are in that bean, how tight the cell structure is. So for example, coffees from Kenya or Sumatra, you'll need, or Costa Rica as well is right up there. So you can actually measure that, so you know in your head how you have to roast it prior, like when you're coming into it, so you don't waste too much. With those coffees, you have to put more energy in early to get all the way to the center of the bean, and then as you go through, you can taper it off. And because it has so many more cells, it's so much more dense, it holds that energy as well through the roast. So at the end, you need to have less flame necessarily going on the roast, and the bean will carry itself to the end of the roast to make sure you don't over roast the center of the bean and all that, because then you end up with bitterness. So, which is obviously not necessarily, sometimes that's what you want in different cultures, but not what we want here in Australia for the most part. So yeah, I think, we just literally, it was trial and error, man. I think we would have done 1,000 roasts before we had a customer to sell to. And we ordered our 25 kilo roaster, which is actually just a decent sized roaster for someone who's starting out. But obviously we had aspirations by this point. And whilst the roaster was on the way, we won our first commercial client who had 74 sites nationwide, a convenience chain. And it was surreal, obviously. So this is where the relationship with my dad's business started to really play into our hands. So he had the coffee machines in there, but we still had to sort of build ourselves up, and we made ourselves sound like a big company when we were trying to do the tender for this. And so we won this contract. We got to produce, I think it was like 320 kilos of coffee, I think at the time, or 350 kilos of coffee a week. And we had a 1 kilo roaster. Yeah, okay. And you do a roast every like 10 minutes, for example. So it got pretty old pretty quick. But by the time that the bigger roaster arrived, I think we were only like 3 months into it. So we're borderline doing shift work to get it all done and packed. So yeah, then the bigger one arrived, and we got stuck into it. Once that arrived, we felt the confidence where we could give a bit of love to specialty cafes. By this point, we were up to 3,000 roasts or something. So we were starting to sort of build an identity, a way that we're roasting, and an understanding of what we can get out of coffee as well. By this point, we had obviously then tried 20 different coffees, and we were starting to diversify also what we were buying as well to try and bring out some different flavors. So yeah.
Like when you first got that business involved, where you had 75 stores nationwide, like for yourself personally, like what was that feeling like to begin with? Did it make it feel more real in that moment, or did it motivate you even more? Or like
definitely motivated me. I think the part that motivated me the most was the process of winning that contract, how much I had to learn, how quickly, in terms of when you're quoting. That was the first time quoting as a new business for something that really, if you get it wrong, it's over before it begins.
Yeah.
So I had to learn, and that's always a thing. And I don't really care whether people say that they're money focused or money driven or anything. That's what motivates them. I think inherently in every single person, if you're learning, you become more motivated. Always.
Definitely.
And that's something I've always said, that I'll never stop learning. And that's the best piece of advice I ever got from my mum. She said, never stop learning, because that's when the second you stop learning, number one, your motivation will dip, and number two, immediately you're falling behind.
Stop the progression.
Yeah, don't start thinking you know better than other people. You win a couple of awards and think, oh, I'm the best. No. And I found that in the coffee industry, especially, like I said, there's so many different compounds, over 6,000 different varieties of coffee that you can find anywhere in the world. All these different roasters, whether someone's been in the industry for, 2 months or 40 years, you can learn from that person. Yeah. Whether it's something that you want to apply to what you're doing, that's up to you. But at least taking it on board, recognizing it, and realizing that you didn't know that before. And you slowly build up. You take little pieces from all these people that you're talking to, again, leading back into relationships with people, and you build up knowledge, and you can steer yourself in different directions based on that.
Yeah, especially the coffee world too. Like, it's a massive industry. So many people with so much expertise. They've been doing it for so many decades. Yeah. So much to learn. 100%.
I think here in Australia, last year we got over 2 billion Aussie dollars as an industry, of the size of an industry, which it's huge.
Coffee culture here is massive, isn't it?
It is. And people all over the world, they look at Australia. I think it's another reason why I'm so blessed that I was able to start here in Australia, because people all over the world look at Australia as sort of the pinnacle of certainly flavour of what we're able to get out of coffee and what we're doing. But I think we have been pushed here in Australia with the lack of perhaps foreign labour or cheaper labour, that we've been forced into a position where you have to be a lot more clinical in a cafe environment with your wages, and operationally you've got to be a lot more clinical. So I think people look all over the world at us as being the pinnacle of both flavour and operations wise. And that's why you see, those, I think 2018, it took off over in New York for Bluestone Lane. So he came over from Australia, applied Aussie roasting methods along with operations, and the breakfast culture, the smashed avo on toast with feta and dukkha and all this, and applied that over in New York, and it went nuts. And then since then, a fair few have followed suit and gone into different countries as well. And we've done it ourselves, going up to China as well, hoping to achieve something there. So, yeah, we're definitely at the pinnacle for sure.
Yeah, so. Yeah, I agree. And like with Australia, is the climate not, I guess, at a level where it grows good coffee beans? Because a lot of it is sourced from international. And it seems like it's mainly sourced from countries that have rainforests and. Generally speaking, closer to the equator. So obviously we're right down the bottom. But I think our biggest issues in Australia are elevation. So having, for example, when you look at your Costa Ricas and Colombias, you can get up to that sort of like 2,000 meters above sea level, where you can be growing coffee. I think here, the highest growing farm, I think, was at like 600 meters above sea level. Don't hold me to that. We are growing coffee here in Australia, and it's getting a lot better. There's people who have worked all over the world, both as roasters, as green bean importers, and worked very closely with processing methods at farms. There's so many different things that you can do to a coffee after it's been grown, after it's been picked, sorted, and all this. The way you can ferment coffees in tanks, or how long it takes to dry them, and all this. That now those guys are applying knowledge to farmers here in Australia. I think one of the biggest barriers is also the wages again here in Australia. When you look at a farm in Colombia, for example, when I've been walking around there on the farms, that the amount of people that are interacting with the coffee trees and with the coffee beans, cherries, once they've been picked, before it even gets on the boat to come to us, is madness. To think that we even get a cup of coffee here
in, you know, some service stations for $2, but even just for $5-6 now in a cafe.
Yeah, because I go to Shell, the Coles Shell coffee machines. Like that's my go-to on the way to work.
Yeah,
and like $2 for a coffee is incredible.
Exactly, and that's linking back. That's my dad's coffee machine that's making that coffee there. But how we get a coffee over here for that is madness. But I think there's also people just not seeing that there's money in it here in Australia. There isn't, because there's not that much of an interest in Australian grown coffee because it hasn't had the quality in the past. Yeah. It's increasing. And I think those guys that are bringing knowledge on how to ferment coffees and try and bring out the flavors that are there. Yeah. It's obviously a very different coffee to what you'd get anywhere else in the world. So trying to process those in a way that highlights those, and then learning a way to roast that also brings those out, that's what's happening now. So it is coming. Yeah. And obviously global warming and everything, it's turning into somewhere where you can grow coffee. Yeah. Certainly like cans is becoming a lot more prominent now.
Yeah, that makes sense, because to make Australia more established in the coffee world, do you think it comes down to maybe the blend of the both? But I'm keen to hear what you think. Do you think it comes down to marketing, or do you think it will come down to how the experts perceive it when these competitions happen with Australian coffee beans?
Yeah, I think it'll be probably a combination of both. The first things first is we need to get the product right and need to prove, probably in a blind environment like a competition, that it works. But also just having, I think there's a lot of roasters and a lot of people in the coffee community in Australia are very open-minded. So if those farmers are taking their coffees in and they're trying something new and it's tasting good, then they talk about it. They talk about it within the community, and it sort of spreads that way. And then having some of the bigger roasters, the bigger players like Toby's Estate, for example, if they jump on it, or Veneziano, they get on it and they start driving it, guys who have got global reach, then it can go somewhere. And that's going to, again, once it gets to that point, that's when marketing is going to become key. Yeah. Okay. But then it's a matter of having enough people interested in producing it as well, is going to be the next real barrier, and to find a way that we can make money out of it that's on the same level as what you can get working any normal job in Australia.
True, because like wages and also tax as well, pretty high tax over here too, so it's like another barrier to face too.
Exactly.
With yourself, like, do you have like a certain area of the world of coffee that you prefer?
Yeah.
Like, do you have a favorite? Because I had coffee from Papua New Guinea. I went to a cafe, there's actually one in Deception Bay at the flower shop, and she's from PNG, and the husband, and they make PNG food and coffee, and it was bloody delicious.
Yeah. PNG coffee is banging. It's got a lot of body. Cuts through the milk really well. But for example, what you're drinking is a Kenya. I fully washed Kenya, nice and clean, no fermenting, just exactly as the coffee should be. Yeah,
and that's good too, especially with black coffees as well. Like, it wasn't bitter.
No, exactly.
Sometimes you can get.
Yeah, so I think for me it's Kenya or Costa Rica. I think the first time that I had an attempt when we started out, first year of roasting, and we bought a high-end Costa Rica from the Tira estate, and we tasted that this was like an hour out of the roaster when you're meant to age coffee for 14 days generally speaking to be at its peak. So to taste it about an hour out of the roaster just because I couldn't wait. I mean, that was one of the most frustrating things when we were starting out doing trial and error, like I said, is you'd roast a coffee, try something new, but then you got to wait for like 2 weeks to see what the outcome was of what you did. So it's a matter of tracking as well, all these different roasts that you're doing, what you did. You have, like, if you don't write it down, there's no chance you're remembering it, and you'll never do it again.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, I think Costa Rica, we tried it, and it's so good. There's nothing else I've ever tasted, and we did that.
It's a lot more than meets the eye, isn't it, coffee? Like, it's a lot more complex than just a coffee bean, grind it down, put it in the machine. It's
100%.
Like you said, over 800 different flavors.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when it comes down to it, all the different varietals, like I mentioned before, when you go and visit the farms and you see people walking up these, borderline cliff mountainsides, picking the coffees, picking the cherries when they're just ripe, not underripe, overripe, when they're just ripe, really caring. And then they obviously bring down what they've picked off the trees, and then there's people there on benches sorting these, going, no, yes, no, and this is ripe, that's good to go. And then it's pulped, or sometimes it's just dried with the cherry on, and then that flavour seeps into the bean. There's so many different things that then happens before it goes to a dry mill, and then the shipping has to be right to make sure that the beans aren't affected on the way over here, and bringing it down to the right moisture content. And then when it gets here and you're roasting it, at any one of these phases, it can be let down and result in a rubbish cup of coffee.
Yeah, true.
So, and one bean in an espresso shot can ruin the cup.
Yeah, well,
for sure. So, yeah, for it all to be right and all these things to be aligned to end up with a stunning cup of coffee at the end, honestly, I don't know how.
Especially it gets from like Brazil to North Lakes.
Exactly, yeah, Brazil to North Lakes, and then it gets shipped to, I don't know, let's say, for example, one of our furthest out into like Kununurra. Yeah, I don't understand.
Where's that? Kununurra.
So WA.
WA.
Yeah, so regional WA, or even like Catherine.
Yeah.
You know, it's like 3 hours south of Darwin, you know, how it gets all the way to there and still tastes good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's astonishing.
So does it get sent to you and then you dispatch it throughout Australia that way?
Yeah, so obviously the green bean comes in. So then we roast it all, pack it all, get it into its boxes, track all the roast dates and everything, and then we ship it out when the order obviously comes in.
Yeah.
Out all over Australia. We're approaching the period now where we have to go refrigerated transport over to WA.
Yeah, okay.
Because the coffee can obviously sweat when it's in the bags when it gets up really high. It's like any food product, it doesn't like fluctuation of temperatures. You want to try and keep it as stable as you can. So,
what do you think about people that put coffee in the fridge?
I was waiting for that.
Because I see a lot of people say do it, some people say don't do it. I have no idea. So is it good? Is it not? Does it ruin the coffee?
It definitely doesn't ruin the coffee. I think for me, what I always say to people is the number one enemy of coffee is oxygen. It's the air. So number one, so long as, say, for example, you've got a Ziploc bag, squeeze all the air out, lock it. If it's in a cupboard, it's going to last for borderline the same amount of time as a fridge. Yeah, okay. The biggest difference that comes into refrigerating coffee is when you get below, I believe it's minus 14 degrees Celsius, putting it in the freezer, you can actually freeze it in its aging process and hold it there. And this came out, I think, around 2020. Some guys down in Canberra, Honor, who have always been sort of the forefront of trying new things in coffee. I believe it started there. But yeah, basically opened up a cafe in Sydney and in Canberra as well, where basically they'd have test tubes of the coffee sat in freezers. So then they've roasted a batch of coffee, and it works especially well when, you know, the coffee that they're using can cost $1,000 a kilo. Yeah, well. So to then roast that and have to use that, you're going to have to charge for a cup there like $60-$70 at least or more. So to get the amount of people in to spend that much on a cup of coffee, try that. It's a hard sell, trust me. But so if they basically wanted to be able to roast a kilo of this coffee and be able to freeze it in time, so that then if it takes a year to go through, that's fine. Yeah. So I think that's where that sort of process came from. But yeah, so if you store it below that point, down to I think minus 25 degrees or something, then you can freeze it in its aging process. Then you can store that flavour and grind it from frozen. You don't need to bring it up to room temp or anything.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to freeze some coffee tonight.
Yeah, to get the freezer cranked down. I don't know if domestic freezers, do they get down to that temperature? I'm not sure.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah. You probably have to like something specialised.
Yeah, some commercial freezer.
Yeah. But are you in 3,000 different stores, or what was that number you said before, 3,000?
Yeah, so that was actually when I was talking about my dad's business, so like 3,000 machines nationwide. For me, I'd say we're in about 1,000 stores nationwide. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is a lot of it is white bag contract roasting, which, like I said, was the foundation of the business to sort of hold us together through COVID, luckily. But so, you know, every Caltex or Puma service station or Night Owl convenience nationwide, they're all our coffee going in there. Night Owl now has our brand in there, and I've only been able to do that because of the machines that they've put in. I've worked with them for a long time, and I trust that the machine can actually produce the standard of coffee and consistently, and there's someone operating it on a store level every single day to make sure it's in those parameters. So that's been huge for us. I think Caltex, let's see what happens there. They're now investing in the same equipment, albeit a different model to what now we're using. So we'll see if we end up going with the brand there. They've still got a few more sites, I think about another 60 or 70 that need to come over to the new equipment. But it's a matter of whether they want to do that or not. For me, it's a very difficult line what you're sort of treading on there between I want the brand to be perceived as a really high quality brand because I know what coffee I'm buying, and I know the standard of coffee that I buy for cafes, for single origins and all that, and I know the standard that we can produce with roasting, and like we've proven that with the amount of awards and everything that we've won in the world's largest coffee roasting competition. So I know we produce a really good coffee, and I'm very cautious to perhaps devalue the brand by being somewhere where it's a $2 coffee.
Yeah.
But then again, at the same time, it's fantastic awareness to have a nationwide, company and jump on board with the brand. And if the coffee is being produced by that machine and it's universal in every single store, I know how it's coming out and it's coming out incredible, then it's doing no damage at all.
Yeah.
And not forgetting that there's probably only 20% of people in Australia that truly pay attention to it and care about a brand.
Yeah.
Let's be real. When still, I don't know how much, I think it's still 50% of, or the largest or the most consumed coffee style in Australia is still instant. So we're still playing with that. So yeah.
Because like especially being in 1,000 stores, there's potentially 100,000 people a day drinking your coffee.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
I haven't actually thought of that, but yeah. I'd say so. Yeah, that would be 2 kilos on average per store. Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah,
that's crazy to think, to be honest.
It's an incredible feat, especially like within 7 years as well.
Yeah, and that came way quicker than I was expecting it to come. Bringing on, for example, Caltex. At the time, it was Puma before they did their big split off with the Caltex Woolies and Caltex Fooderies, but when that came on board, that was another one where my dad's business and the relationships between me and him, I do the coffee and he does the machines. We're able to work a deal out that basically none of our competitors on a roasting side or from the machine side could compete with because we're wanting to do well for each other.
Yeah.
So obviously working something out where, I'm chipping in effectively something out of my margin to help my dad make enough money to service that equipment. That's something where not a lot of people could compete with at that point in time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it would be a good idea as well, like you said before, with getting it into a place where it is more affordable, I guess, for the people that aren't too much in depth with coffee, just more on the go. They get coffee, so like a $2 or $3 one. Because like you look at brands like Nike, for an example, you have Jordans, which is like the expensive version of the Nike shoe, and then you have Air Forces, which are like $80 everyone can get. Then you have like different levels, like entry points that people can get into.
Yeah, exactly. And like they're borderline, I don't know whether it initially, it obviously did become that with Jordans straight away, like a sub-brand almost. And I have toyed with the idea of having Latitude as borderline a parent company that deals with a lot of the commercial stuff, and maybe try and think of a sub-brand that sits underneath it that targets that specialty market. I'm still toying with it now to this day, but let's see, maybe it's something that we've got up our sleeve for next year. But I think now that's the next focus, the next sort of phase for Latitude, I think, is we've neglected, because of how the commercial side of the business really saved us through that tough period of COVID. I've neglected a lot the specialty side of the business. And now that's been, since July this year, that's been my main focus. Trying to build an online presence as well, online retail, direct to the end consumer. And then obviously trying to get back into some networking, which was difficult for a few years, to get back out there and do that and speak to cafe owners and try and get our position back in the market, get some hype happening in the specialty industry. Because like I said, I know the product that we've got. I just need to get it back in front of people. And I've always neglected the online side of the business, which is a shame. If we had been 2 years earlier, it probably would have been established for us to fully capitalize in COVID when a lot of people bought home machines, and we sort of missed the curve, if you will, there. But that everyone's still got those machines, as it's still up there in terms of the amount of people making coffee at home. And I neglected it in the early days in terms of also paying attention to the customers the few that were buying online, and making sure they, receive coffee straight away. Like it was the first thing out. I was still prioritizing getting the majority of our coffee volume out there. So yeah, now putting a big shift of focus since July on that, and it's come a long way.
Yeah.
And that's come on the back of social media too. We brought in a really good young girl, Gemma, who's, she was working at Basecamp at our flagship cafe here in North Lakes. And she's studying marketing at uni. And I said, look, let's maybe try and do you want to use Latitude as sort of a real world application for the knowledge you're learning at uni? Which I always struggled with when I was in school as well, is sort of like you study economics or business management when I was in school. And because at the time you're in school, you weren't leaving or using that knowledge and then applying it to a real world situation necessarily. I definitely, that's why I sort of suggested it to her, because I recognized that early on with myself as well, that the second, now if I was studying the same stuff as I was studying in school with economics and business and management, I found myself in the early days of Latitude applying that. And then it all made sense, whereas it wasn't making sense when I was in school.
Yeah, and especially with branding as well. Like what happened with branding 2 years ago on the social media platforms, completely different than it is now. Like the way I have to advertise and promote this podcast, even from 6 months ago, has completely changed. That's the thing with social media and online and putting your brand out there. It's always chopping and changing.
I think that's what happens when so many people are interacting with it.
Yeah.
And that's social media. Everyone, this sheer amount of people, of course it's going to shift.
Yeah. It'd be good too to hear your story on more podcasts as well, like getting out there, because you are like the big part of the brand, like.
Yeah, that's the one scary thing. I was definitely scared early on when I look at people's businesses and it's their name on it. It's very difficult when you think of, because you've got to keep in your mind you're going to probably try and sell this business at some point. For me, I feel like Latitude could be something I do forever, but at some point it's probably going to move on, whether it's when I retire or whatever. So to not have the name on it was important for me, to make sure I could sell it, and the value is in the brand and not necessarily just in me. And that's another reason why constantly I'm I think trying to teach the guys that are working in the warehouse, giving them the knowledge as well, across the whole business. I include them in everything. They know when something's not going right. They know when we're struggling to find coffee, we're struggling to, put together necessarily funds to purchase another container of Brazil. So they're aware of that. I keep them in the loop so they see all the struggles too. So as people come in, they're doing the same to the people under them as we grow. And that's a culture that I want to have in the business for sure, that everyone communicates well.
That's important too, especially for your own well-being and health, like running a business as well, like making sure you're delegating and involving other people rather than holding it all within yourself and trying to take on so much stress.
Yeah, 100%. It's massive, the delegation part of it. Never struggled with delegating at all. I definitely recognised the people that can be given certain roles within the business and take them on. And people that just you give them a task and they just do that day in, day out, exactly the same. Perfect. Everyone needs one of those. Just sharing that knowledge. But I think looping back to what I was saying, that the main skill that I feel as though I was advanced in coming into the business was communication and talking to people. Was when it comes to, giving people that knowledge, giving it to them in a way that makes them want to listen. And then they actually take it on board and then use it. That's been massive for me to teach people, the way that Latitude roasts coffee, for example. And that's come from my mum. Again, she's sort of saying all the way through school, social skills the most important skill that there possibly is. I had one lad who jumped up 2 year groups in school who came up into our year, but he's not necessarily socially wasn't very good. Whether that was down to any form of disabilities, I don't know. It's unfair and sad if it was. But he ended up going to MIT and everything, and I couldn't help but think, he's going to have all this knowledge, but he's never going to be able to articulate it or tell it to someone or to people in a way that someone can do something with it. Which is, it's sad, really.
Especially when you look at the evolution of humans, like the way we've evolved so much for so many generations is through communication. Like from the Stone Age days, teaching the next person how to create a spear, then how to start a fire, then how do you make a bigger fire, and then how do you collect wood to get the fire, and then how do we get more wood with less people but carry more load, and then communicating that, and then throughout our generations now we're sitting there recording the podcast that's
Yeah,
going to put out to the world.
Yeah, exactly. It's all communication, knowledge sharing, and building relationships is number one. Because through those, then you learn more. You talk to people, you interact with them, and you pick things up and you can act on them.
Yeah.
I think it was even another part of being able to delegate is allowing the boys, like I've done a lot less roasting in the last 12 months, a lot less. And that's enabled me to focus on sort of the business as a whole. And I think, so just in the month of November, all coffee in the world is bought US dollars per pound.
Yeah.
And that's what is measured on in terms of the stock market. And being across that has been another aspect that I feel we've had a couple of good wins recently. But we basically bought, by having good relationships like we had with, like we have up in China where we've opened up cafes up there, because of those relationships, we gained knowledge from the guys over there on the ground that a big deal was about to go down at the G20 summit recently, where all the world's leaders got together, between basically a Chinese chain, the biggest one in China, that's sort of backed by the government, and Brazil, to purchase possibly up to 20% of their production for the next 5 years. Yeah. So, and we heard about that end of October, sort of waited for a minute and said, let's go for it. So I committed to, I only needed to buy 20 tons of Brazil at this point, but I committed to 2. So I bought 40 tons, 2 containers. So I bought 40 tons of this Brazil. I think that was on the 1st of November. It was on a Friday. And I think we bought it like $2.47, $2.47 to the pound. And now when we're talking today, I believe we're at $3.38. Wow. So it's gone up 40%. And that, I worked it out earlier this week, that decision has basically saved me 80 grand just doing that. And that's within the space of, call it 3 weeks. We were already up at this sort of level earlier on in the week. So it's literally an $80,000 decision based on a relationship that we've made. And just listening to them and gaining that knowledge. And it's just,
It's also having people on the ground as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, at the end of the day, that's going to come into our own when because it ends up that coffee's going to Caltex, for example, and not having to put their price up now until at least November next year, let's say, because of that decision is huge, when every other roaster on the market is going to be putting their prices up again, I assure you, within the next 6 months.
Yeah, and I believe having all these relationships within Latitude as well will increase the value of it when you have that exit as well. Yeah. Which, because like having the value of people and relationships like that sometimes can be invaluable as well.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely. And I think now the big focus, like I said, is creating value in the brand itself. That's the next big phase. That's the next big step, because more often than not, a lot of businesses, when they're sold, 50% is borderline made up of the brand in a lot of cases, and then 50% is made up of what you're actually doing. Yeah.
Because like, is that why clothing came a part of it as well? Like you wanted to edge out into more areas of Latitude because it looks good?
Yeah, maybe. I think, again, it comes back into that diversification. I don't know. For me, the apparel, the T-shirts is something that I really want to push. It's something like I've always had a marketing mind, and it's something where you can get creative. You can do runs every month or two. Yeah. When you go buying coffee bags, then you're probably doing that. That's sort of a 8 to 10 month commitment. You don't want to be changing the coffee bags all the time. And you can't, because you've got to buy a minimum order quantity. You can mess around a little bit more with T-shirts and have a little bit more fun and having people walk around in them. And since I put a bit more effort into the apparel recently, certainly since July, having all my mates been like, I need one, and then they're walking around and they've had a few people asking them, and it's generated a couple of leads just by that. So I'll take it. And it means that I get free clothing too. Yeah. So.
The way I see clothing, it's like a free marketing, like free billboards. Yeah. So people are walking around the billboarding your brand. It's a really cool way to branch it out, but then also give someone like clothes are good quality too. Yeah, exactly. 100%. And it comes back to being the same as the interaction with your brand. Like the first interaction someone has with your coffee, for example, is your bag. You've got a rubbish looking bag, or it's not printed, for example, it doesn't look fully put together. It's a very different interaction than if you have, a really sexy bag and everything about this, the touch, the feel, the satin feel,
God, it feels high quality.
Oh, we all eat with our eyes. So.
Yeah, we do 100%. That's why I borderline always end up ordering too much food when I'm at a restaurant, which is bad. I
have the same problem. Like 3 different entrees.
Yeah, I need to wrap that in line. But
yeah, I want to talk about some of the competitions Latitude's entered. What were some of the first ones you got into, and what was your, I guess, feeling stepping into it?
Yeah, so we did our first roast, like I said, 2018. That year, the Golden Bean was on, which is the world's largest coffee roasting competition. The largest segment of that is the Australia-New Zealand one as well. So I think that year there would have been 2,000 entries. And we've been roasting for like 4 months. And we created this blend, which is the blend that we ended up winning that commercial client with, that first one. Put in, I think, 4 entries into the categories, weren't really expecting anything. And we won a gold straight away in the milk-based category. And that set our sights too high. I was like, God, we're really good at this, let's go. And then it ended up taking me 5 years. We won our next one 2022. So 4 years later, we finally got another gold. So, and we were entering every year since then into different competitions, and we weren't quite getting there to a gold. And it was sort of like, what did we do so good that first year? But yeah, and then since then, I think that 2022 was our year where we really took it home. We Tasmanian Fine Food Show. I think there was 2 golds in that. The Melbourne, so the Australian International Coffee Association, or awards, sorry. There was a gold in that for the filter, which I always consider when you do well in categories where it's a black coffee or you produce a really great black coffee. To me, they're held at the highest regard personally, just for me, because there's nowhere to hide. You're not hiding behind possibly 6 ounces of milk. With
like sugar levels in the milk and like the sweeter.
Yeah, all these other proteins and fats. So it's like it's the purest form of tasting coffee is when it's black. So to win in those categories it meant a lot. And that was also a time that I really, really needed something to tell me I'm doing a good job, because in 2021 was when me and my business partner that I started Latitude with went our separate ways. And at the time, he was doing a lot of the roasting and I was more business focused as well. I was still on the tools, obviously, but sort of when he left, he was, really giving it to me about how basically we're going to go under and the coffee's going to be rubbish because it's going to be me roasting it. And it shouldn't have affected me because I knew that I could roast coffee well, but it really did. It really got at me because he was someone that, we bounced off each other. We respected each other, at least I thought. And it ended nasty. It's another life lesson that, I've definitely taken on board, and I'll never get into business with someone who I haven't known for a very long period and know their character, know the people that they also, you can tell a lot about a person by who they're associated with as well. So it's definitely something I've learned. But then the first, after him telling me that, I'm rubbish at roasting, it got in my head, and I thought genuinely for about 10 months, maybe I'm not as good at this. And the business didn't grow. And it was probably because of a lack of motivation, because I felt down, but also things at home as well. And it was just a really rubbish year. And then end of 2022, went back in and we won, I think, a gold in the Australian International Coffee Awards, which was regarded the hardest one to do well in, real like Q graders all tasting it. So coffee sommeliers tasting the coffee, breaking it down into all these different categories. So winning in filter in that was massive. And then coming into the Golden Bean, and we won again in filter with a different coffee, bearing in mind. So 2 different coffees that we put in, one in the 2 biggest and most highly regarded coffee roasting competitions in the world. Then all of a sudden I was like, okay, we've got some belief in here now. And then we sort of started to build from there. And I think for me, having good people around me since then as well. So prioritizing a lot more, I guess, 2023 and 2024. But at the end of 2022 as well, which was probably why I did so well, was because I was a bit happier at home. Put into a new group of friends, out by myself for the first time since I was 19 and single. But and then, now having a great person by my side at home has really helped me to stay motivated, but also to recognise that is my priority. at the end of the day. Like I do, like, don't get me wrong, Latitude's right there, but I'm definitely happier and perform better when I'm around good people at home. And then since then, Latitude's just gone from strength to strength for sure.
Yeah, because one thing I've learned is like business problems are usually linked to personal problems.
And for him, I know what caused it all. It was, you know, at the time he left his ex-wife, and she was a very tough woman. Yeah. She was a headmistress actually or I think at the time she was the deputy headmistress at Nudgee Boys College. Yeah, okay. So you can imagine big boys school. Yeah. So you can imagine the sort of woman it takes to try and keep everyone in line there. So she was doing that for him, and he left her and ended up actually with our first ever cafe account up the sunny coast with her who owned that cafe. Yeah, well. She's a great girl. She always has been, but she gave him, I think, the freedom, or wasn't as tough on him as he needed to keep him in line, which I've also recognised in myself is what I need, and that's the woman that I've got now that keeps me in line.
It makes it. Oh, sorry, you go on. I was going to say, like, having a good woman at home or a good woman by your side, I feel like can elevate your mission to the next level, because I feel like it gives you that extra spurge of energy that sometimes you may need.
Oh man, it's changed my life the last sort of year for me. Just getting up, knowing that, and also seeing someone, don't get me wrong, in the past, hard work ethics have been there, but for her, she's got such a hard work ethic, and seeing that every single day, but also, I guess the time that we have together, and she brings out like the child in me. So like you go to work and you can just dominate and do everything, but then when you come home, you can just
relax,
completely be yourself, and like the boy in you can come out, and that's truly to me switching off, which means I'm energized for the next day. Yeah. And so the time that we have together is invaluable to Latitude as well as to me. Yeah, for sure.
I think that's why so many people burn out, especially in business, because you don't switch off 24/7. No. Like it's work, home, thinking about work. Next day, get up, thinking about work, go to work, finish work, think about work, and it's just a repeat cycle.
Yeah, and you're not growing as a human in that part either. I don't believe. I feel like you're growing maybe, with work, or you might be, I don't know. You're just there. You're there more often, and you can react to things. We talked about reactive earlier. You can certainly be more reactive in that regard, but. You got to have that time at home, and it's got to be quality for you and for your soul.
Yeah, for your own soul and well-being.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because especially sometimes I feel like we need a bit of external validation to, I guess, solidify what we're doing, because we can get so caught up in the moment when we constantly want to progress. We can kind of feel like we're not achieving anything because we always want to improve and get better, so that we're not really satisfied. But when we get the external validation, it gives us moments to reflect and have gratitude.
You know what? I haven't actually thought about it that hard, but like when I get little wins, even if it's the smallest little win, a tiny little cafe or working with a new school, she's like, well in, like you didn't have anyone you didn't have any schools before. Yeah. She's always there and gives just that tiny little touch of what I need. But then we don't really talk about too much work at home, although she's a hairdresser, so you get some nice gossip, but we don't talk too much about work at home, which is lovely. It's, that's the dream.
Yeah. Especially for doing this podcast, I've been doing it for nearly 4 years now, which is crazy. But one thing I've learned from business owners is, it's not even just business owners, from psychologists and stuff I've talked to as well. Our brains work really well on reward. So if we're working hard and we don't feel a sense of reward, we can start implementing self-sabotaging behaviors, which then will backtrack us back to square one or even further back. But if we start to reflect and have gratitude for the little wins along the way of pursuing the dream, we can actually be more motivated and become a lot more curious and a lot more adaptable. And then it just improves our own well-being and just soul.
Yeah, and I'm terrible for that. I feel as though I need to have immediate gratification or immediate reward. Yeah. I don't need. I want. I want immediate gratification or immediate reward. I'm so impatient. So getting small wins and recognizing them or having someone point them out has definitely been massive for me to carry on growing. You have to look long term, and but those small wins add up to a long-term, win, and eventually getting to a goal. Yeah. Don't know what the goal is. But the goal, I guess the goal would just be to carry on doing what we're doing, build up the actual brand of Latitude. That's the immediate goal. And a part of that, what that will cause is the business to become bigger and to have people, have more people working in the business. I think I saw actually, was it Brad Pitt who's giving a talk recently, and he was saying he was reading a passage saying about what's more important, the journey or the destination? And then the other person responds saying the company. Yeah, and it's so true. And I was sort of preparing in my head a speech ready for our Christmas party. I'm going to use that in the Christmas party. So wipe that from your minds, anyone who's listening who works for me. But it's so true. Like the people that we've got is diverse in the business. Everyone brings something that's so different. Like you would never pick any of these lot outside of the business, wouldn't be hanging out together. Yeah. But we all bring something so different and different points of view that it all adds up to this collective I guess a view on the world that so many different people have. So it's definitely the company, and it's the company that you have at home.
100%.
And it's the company that we're keeping whilst we're building the business as well. Yeah,
because even the company around you can influence your own internal chatter as well, which is also like a massive impact in how we live.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, it's huge.
Well, even thinking about like Benny's Bucks, like going the sunny coast is awesome, but the company we went with was so good, and that's why the whole weekend was just great, because the company we had.
Yeah, 100%. And it was what was it, 25% or something of the people there had never met before.
Yeah, literally.
So the fact that then everyone got along so quickly also tells you, and we know Benny well, but he'll just rule someone out if he goes, you're not good for me, and you're not bringing anything to the table for me, or I don't agree with you, then that's it, you're gone from
decisive.
Benny. Yeah, he's decisive. And because of that, it ended up being a lot of lads that were mighty similar.
Yeah, definitely.
In one regard, so which I haven't actually thought about that before. But
yeah. But we've gone back to your story quickly before we get into the community Q&A. Yeah. I just want to touch on goals. Do you find like one thing that's been really helpful is being flexible on goals? Because I find so many people in business set a goal, not just business, but personal goals as well, whether it's health and all that stuff too. They'll set a goal and they're so rigid in the pathway they get there that they may miss other opportunities. Do you think flexibility is so important? Because you may learn something next week that could actually make your goal bigger and better. Yeah. But instead of being closed-minded and be like, no, I can't do that because I've got to take this
get there. Yeah. No, I think it's definitely huge to be flexible. Like I said, if I wasn't flexible and I wasn't open to being diverse early on in Latitude, it would have died after 18 months. Yeah. So that's, again, a lesson that I learned very early on, and something that I'll always apply, to definitely be flexible. And when it comes to goal setting, I always seem to look short, medium term, because the long-term goal, it can shift and move so much that, you can lose sight of it very quickly, even if you set it. So yeah, I think short, medium term, definitely. Like medium term is, I want to make the commercial contract roasting side of the business by Christmas next year to be only 50% of the business. So to grow the specialty and the online retail, that's a medium term goal to me. And then there's short term goals that are within that you have to set, so that, because I know I'm impatient, I need to set short-term goals to know I'm moving in the direction. But it also means being short-term, it doesn't feel as so much of a commitment, and looking so long-sighted that it can move a little bit and I can get to there to carry on to the medium term.
But it's also not so overwhelming. So when you set like a massive goal, it can be a bit stressful and overwhelming. But if you set like achievable goals along the way, so much easier.
You'll actually get there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, brother, we're going to get into our community Q&A. We had 3 questions come through. Yeah. The first one is, what do you look for in a coffee blend?
Something that combines well with milk, number one. So you don't want, when you think of milk, you don't want like lemon and acid. That sounds pretty average, right? So definitely some chocolate notes. It needs to cut through the milk. I don't want to feel like I'm just, drinking a cup of milk. I do like to know I've had a coffee. Don't get me wrong, I don't want it to be dark and bitter cutting through. But so yeah, your chocolate notes, I don't mind a bit of fruit, a little bit of strawberry. I've grown up, absolutely loved strawberry Nesquik. Yeah. So for me, that's where my childhood goes to, like some red fruits. And because of my childhood, I'll still look for that. So like maybe some chocolates, some strawberries coming through to combine with some milk.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, you'll go to your sort of Colombias with a little bit of African flair in there, with the fruitiness that you want. Normally will come from somewhere like Ethiopia.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice. Next one is, what's been your biggest lesson in business?
Selecting your business partner wisely,
Yeah.
or don't select one. Find a way.
Yeah.
Find a way to not have to go down that path. And it's happened now twice. So with Latitude, and also with another business that we went and did. So yeah, it's definitely choose wisely who you've got heavily involved, and choose wisely who you're listening to on the journey.
Yeah. Agreed. I'll quickly add to that as well, because I think so many people feel like when they start an endeavor, they need someone else to do it with them. An example would be me with this podcast. When I first started, it was me and my best mate, Bill, and he did the first 4 episodes with me. And then he exited after 4 episodes because he had his own things he wanted to pursue. Yeah. And at that moment for me, I was like, I don't know if I can do this by myself, because I relied on having someone else with me.
To bounce off.
Didn't believe in myself.
Yeah.
You know, I think that was the main core of it, was the self-belief. I was like, I'll just wing it by myself and see how it goes. And thankfully I did that.
Yeah, mate, it's working. So well done.
But so many people, they think that they have to get someone else to partner up with them. Sometimes it's beneficial depending on, I guess, the logistics and things of it. But yeah, just have self-belief that you can do it by yourself as well.
Yeah.
Next one is, what has been the most rewarding part with being with Latitude?
Most rewarding part, I think there's 2 parts. There's on a personal level is being able to travel all over the world. Only in 2022 I did my first origin trip over to Colombia, and meeting the people at the farm, being able to use the Spanish that I learned in school for a lot of the producing countries there in Central and South America. But yeah, I think traveling the world, seeing cultures, it's been huge. Traveling the world to China to set up our businesses there, which that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Latitude being a thing. And then I think in terms of the business, our biggest reward has to have been those 2 awards that we won the year after my business partner left.
In 2022?
To sort of give myself the belief to crack on. You can do this. I needed that at that moment in time. That was definitely the biggest reward.
What was it like going to Colombia and going to the farms and meeting the people on the ground? That would have been some sort of experience.
It was quite something, man. It was very eye-opening. Obviously, it's all very well reading about the amount of people, the amount of work that goes into, farming coffee and everything. But walking up those cliff sides, you're knackered when you get home from a day. And we're not picking coffees off a tree and then taking them back down. And we're not mentally focusing on, what cherry's right, and we're not actively involved in it. And we're just walking up the sides of these mountains all day. And it's also dangerous. A lot of to get to some of these farms, we had an accident getting to one of them as well. And, jumping on the back of these Jeeps, 8 people standing on the back of it on a cliff's edge going through a waterfall, and those guys do it to get there to work every day. Wow. And we're lucky, the people that we went with CoffeeNet, some of their farms and people that they work with, they treat them really well. So to see that, and to see the coffee that we're buying, that Caltex are ending up buying, is actually giving really nice and great living conditions for the farmers as well, and working with reforestation programs. That was huge to see as well, to actually physically touch it and it becomes sort of tangible.
Yeah.
That was massive. But the knowledge, man, I thought I knew a lot about coffee. Yeah. And after day 1, I was like, I know nothing.
I'm a student.
And I'm genuinely a student. This is like year 1 now. Yeah. And that was mentally draining as well. So tired every day, just taking things on. And that changed again, the way that I was roasting coffee. After that, I really applied a new way of thinking to it, and probably a story that we needed to tell a little bit more. We never talked about the farms. We just talked about roasting and how we roast and how great the flavors are. Yeah. But then to actually talk about it from knowledge, from a place of knowing, that was massive.
Because they probably had generations of family come through and do that as well.
I think they're 4th generation farmers who we went with. So,
what were some of the things you learned most about the people from there?
Probably the scary part was how generous Generous with time. The guys out there are borderline paid to like just pick as much as they possibly can in a day, and you put one of them up to talk, and until you stop talking and walk away, they won't stop, and they just love that interaction. Generous with their time, which was huge, and also appreciating the amount of knowledge that they have over there. They just don't have the platforms to necessarily maybe talk about it like we do. And even still, we've got such great access to knowledge, but they don't. But yet here we are learning from
them. Yeah.
So don't sort of think you know better again.
Yeah, it's cool to like be able to go all the way to where it's sourced from and like actually see it firsthand where you're getting your beans from and how it's sourced, and meeting the people that are doing the work for it on the day-to-day basis.
When you're printing out the labels to stick on the coffee bag and with the name of the farmer on it, and you can hear their voice talking in your head whilst they're standing on the farm looking over this beautiful rainforest with condors flying in the background. It's just it's madness, and it makes you care that little bit more as well. So I'm looking forward to there's two of the lads now who are doing the roasting, majority of the roasting at Latitude, and I need to get them out to Origin soon, because again they'll learn a lot, and then they'll come back motivated, and also it's just a reward. Like, they deserve it.
It'd be cool to see you like vlog it and document the journey.
That's one thing I wish I did. One thing I wish I did was vlog it. We took a load of photos. I didn't do, by this point, I hadn't had my big social media push like we have had now since July. And I wasn't comfortable talking in front of a camera. I'm a lot better at it now, but I definitely wouldn't have been talking in front of a camera at that point. So if I went back now, I feel like the business would get a lot more out of it. That trip, I got a lot out of it. But this one, the next time we go out, it'll definitely be, the business will definitely have a big result from it, a big win.
Yeah, and bring people along on the journey.
Yeah, for sure.
The last question, mate, is the one I ask everyone, but it's something I'm curious in everyone's answer. What's your definition of success?
Having really good people around you. For me, the biggest, I think I've touched on it a couple of times, the thing I value the most is having great relationships. Definitely, and having good people around you. I think, like we said, you can perform so much better as a human and as a business person when you have that, and you're never going to look back at your life and wish you didn't have those great people around you, and just enjoy your time. Like, I think that's the biggest thing for me. It always will be.
Amen. I love it. Henry, thanks for coming on.
Alrighty, thank you.